Hi everyone, and welcome to the Engineers of Tomorrow webinar this afternoon, where we are going to have some discussion and introduce some ideas that we have around this statement that what do hockey and STEM have in common. So we're hoping we can generate some good discussion and hear your ideas around the thoughts that we've had and the opportunities we've had to kind of internally have this discussion. We'd like to bring this idea out to a broader audience and hear back from you. But before we get into that detail, we wanted to take just a few minutes and tell you a little bit about ourselves. So we are, as I mentioned, Engineers of Tomorrow. For those of you who haven't heard of us before, we sometimes refer to ourselves as EOT. So if you hear me say that, that's Engineers of Tomorrow. We are actually a venture of Engineers Without Borders Canada, and we are all about engineering outreach. So we are really interested in the kind of the power that we think that outreach has to have an impact on the youth of today, and by doing that, kind of shape the future and instill that and inspire that that thinking and that positive connection to engineering with the youth and children of today. And also by doing that, you know, those individuals are essentially going to become the general public in the near future. So we think that it also provides the opportunity to shift the perceptions and shape those perceptions that the public has of engineering in the future as well. So here's a little bit about what we do. We have a few things on the go. We manage National Engineering Month. So for those of you who may not be aware of it or may not have heard of National Engineering Month, now you have. It happens every year in March. This is a public campaign that is kind of targeted at impacting or influencing the general awareness of engineering. So with that, again, that general public audience, and specifically, again, focusing on youth and the impact that we can have there. And then we also manage the Engineer in Residence program, and that is in Ontario. That is PEO's, Professional Engineers of Ontario. That's their flagship engineering outreach program. And a similar idea, you know, where engineer volunteers are actually matched with classrooms, and provides the opportunity for those volunteers to go into classrooms at a regular frequency throughout the school year and put a face to engineering that the kids can connect to and create some positive engineering and STEM experiences for those kids. And then we are also, you know, trying to expand that idea of youth outreach, not just with the what we see with the sort of association level with National Engineering Month and the Engineer in Residence program, but expand that to companies. So that whole idea of the sort of volunteer-based employee engagement, we see so much value come out of it. We're fortunate that we're in a position to kind of get the feedback from the volunteers and see the impact, direct impact it has on youth and the real value that that's bringing. So we're really identifying that there's an opportunity there for companies and organizations to get involved and take advantage of some of the value that we're seeing as well. So that's what we do. No, let me go back. There we go. So here's a little snapshot of who we are. Always nice, I think, to put a face to a voice. So here's an opportunity for us to do that for you. So you can see along the top there, this is our team. So Erica, who was speaking before I was, she is the venture lead for Engineers of Tomorrow. And then myself, Rebecca, or she called me Becky, I'm good with either one. I'm the operations manager. And then we also have Vanessa with us, and she is with us for the summer this year. And we were fortunate enough to get Vanessa back this summer. She also worked with us last summer as well as the program coordinator. We also have some advisors that we want to recognize, and these are just people that we can reach out to, and they have some sort of thought leadership in the engineering outreach space and the whole idea of evolving engineering itself. So some great, they provide us some great opportunities for giving us feedback and challenging us and helping us grow those ideas that we're so excited about. So that's Sal, Alan, and Mark that you see there in the middle. And then we also wanted to recognize the Engineers of Tomorrow and alumni. So we have, these great, talented individuals that come and help us out, but then when they finish with us, they get to take that message and the sort of Engineers of Tomorrow thinking and mentality and philosophy, and they carry that forward with them and are it doesn't just end with their work terms. It's continuing on in the work that they're doing and creating some really exciting opportunities as well. So they're down at the bottom there, Jonathan, Shivangana, and the other Jonathan.
Becky, can I just brag really quickly about our alumni and how awesome they are? Jonathan is a mechatronics engineering student from the University of Waterloo, and he was really instrumental in doing a lot of great blogging during National Engineering Month, and he headed back to his classes so invigorated and inspired, and it was really a great reminder that what we talk about all the time in engineering, engineering shaping the future, engineering helping people, that stuff means a lot, especially to the next generation, to know that they can, leave their mark on the world through this type of a career. Shivangana in the middle, she just graduated. She was valedictorian of her class, and she totally rocked her speech. And she mentioned some ideas that sounded very much like EOT and sort of credited us there with the win as well. And Jonathan's out in Quebec City kind of making things happen in French and English. So we just have some amazing people who, even though they don't work for us officially anymore, they're done their co-op terms with us, they keep flying the flag and they keep going forward and making change in their own spaces, and we think they're just awesome.
Great. Yes, please brag. So we'll take just a couple more minutes before we get into the whole idea of hockey and STEM, and we wanted to tell you our engineering stories. And one of the reasons we want to do that is that we really believe that in the power of storytelling as a great tool for sort of the messaging around engineering and connecting with youth and the general public in a way that really isn't maybe done very well today. So we like to practice that ourselves. So we're going to take this opportunity, as I mentioned, to tell you our engineering stories. So for me, it started way back when I was in elementary school, and I grew up in Kingston, Ontario, and I had both my parents were teachers. So, excuse me, so I did not have direct exposure to anyone in my family that was an engineer. But as teachers, great parents they heard about this amazing new camp that was starting up, first time ever in Kingston, called Science Quest, and it was offered at Queen's University. So of course they got up early in the morning. This was of course before the days of logging online to sign your kids up for camp. They got up early in the morning and lined up to make sure that I got a spot and was able to attend Science Quest. And I loved the camp so much. Science Quest actually is now an ACTUA camp, so they have I'm not sure of the total number. I think I know it's more than 20 camps now across, I think it's Ontario. Erica, you can correct me if I'm wrong there. If it's
across Canada.
It's
all of Canada.
Right. So, you know, the start is pretty, I think it's pretty neat that was, you know, I got to be a part of the start of something pretty amazing. And the positive experience that I had influenced me in a way that kept me coming back. So, you know, I went back the next year and the next year until you know, I was too old. I wasn't allowed to go anymore as a camper. But that didn't stop me. I volunteered as a junior counselor at the camp when I went to high school. And then I ended up deciding to go into engineering. So when it came sort of that point in time in my life where I had to make that decision of what am I going to do, finishing up in high school, those positive engineering and STEM experiences that had been made available to me as part of Science Quest, that's a huge contributing factor to the decision that I made without any other sort of external influences from family or whatnot, you know, general media or sort of general information. That's what was there and available to help me make that decision. So ended up deciding to go into engineering, and coincidentally ended up at Queen's for my education, and wouldn't you know it, I went and worked at Science Quest throughout the summers there, which again coincidentally is how I met Erica. So you know, it took me through, and I have distinct memories every summer of, even as a working there as a counselor, providing me an opportunity to reconnect back to why I chose engineering. You know, it's a tough go in university. It's a heavy workload, and there's a lot going on. And so it was nice every summer to be able to reconnect back to that why of what it was that excited me so much about engineering and why I chose it in the first place. So that's my engineering story, anyways, up to university. So with that, I will turn it over to Erica, and she will give you a little bit of her story.
Okay, thank you so much, Becky. And you can hear the excitement and the passion. And obviously, Becky and I go way back, and we are two people who have been through the engineering system, worked in an engineering field, and are now sort of fortunate enough to get to tell these stories and rally a community of volunteers to do the same thing. So unfortunately for me, I did not grow up near an actual camp or near an engineering university. I was in rural Ontario in my childhood, and there weren't any engineers in my family, but I'm very proud to say that I now have two of my younger cousins. One has graduated from engineering and one is currently studying engineering. So I'd like to think that maybe I blazed a trail in my family so that they could have that immediate role model that I didn't have. The first time I heard the word engineering, I think, was in grade 12 when I was looking at what universities I was going to apply to and what I wanted to do, and I really didn't have a sense of what it was, except a very general sense that it involved kind of making stuff happen. It felt like a sort of a heavy-duty, powerful sort of a thing to be a part of, that I could really make tangible change. I could move big things and figure out how the world works and that kind of thing. And I had just loved chemistry in high school. I was fascinated by the periodic table and the idea that, you know, this was the stuff that made up all the other stuff, and that was awesome. So I ended up going on to study materials engineering at Queen's, and it wasn't until I had graduated and actually flung myself out into the world of automotive manufacturing that I started to realize what a good choice engineering was for me. I found the academic environment, then the workload very heavy, and I definitely thought I'd made a mistake and I don't belong here and I can't do this. I went through all of those doubts that I think many students do. But once I started working, I realized, wow, there's so much teamwork here. There's so much cool problem solving. I was working in manufacturing, which is a very, as some of you might know, a very high-stress, high-paced environment. And I love the idea that we could just pull stuff off. We could make it happen. and I was doing project management. I was doing operational problem solving, what I would later do as Lean and Six Sigma certifications, which are basically just finding problems and getting a bunch of people together to solve them. I just really loved that process. And if engineering had been, as I feared it might be, a case of staring at my computer and doing CAD drawings, 10 hours a day all by myself in my cubicle, I definitely don't think I would have lasted. But as it was, I had an opportunity to work together with people, solve problems, make cool stuff happen, and, feel like I was really making a difference. One of the first projects I ever worked on was the process for a part of the 2001 PT Cruiser. Don't know if you remember those vehicles, but every time I saw one go by, even though I thought they were a little bit on the ugly side, I still took that pride in feeling like, you know what, that's sort of my car. I kind of helped make that happen. And there's really nothing like the satisfaction of knowing that you're part of something that made me go, yeah, I really like this, and you know what, I'm good at it. Even though the school part was hard, the in-life part is awesome, and I want other people to understand that as well. So I think that both Becky and I come from that perspective of feeling like we didn't have all this information when we started. We were lucky enough to end up in engineering, and that's part of what really drives us to think about how we can inspire the next generation with good information, not just a lucky guess about what they might be good at or not. So with that, I'm going to transition into our topic at hand. Most Canadian kids are exposed to hockey. So unlike engineering, which is sort of in the shadows and no one really knows what it is, and we used an acronym earlier, which I hope everyone recognized, which is STEM, or STEM. So that does not refer to the bottom part of a plant or stem cell research. It refers to science, technology, engineering, and math. So because they are the ones that are taught in elementary school, we think that science and math tend to hog a lot of the spotlight when it comes to STEM. People think of STEM, they think of science and math right away. And technology maybe is getting a little more prominence due to the way that it has basically infiltrated so many different aspects of our lives now, with smartphones in everyone's pockets, and debates about AI all over the media, and thinking about how we communicate and how much that has changed in the last several years. We still think that engineering somehow has remained in the shadows. Engineering is an intrinsic part, very important part of so many of those technologies, and it's an extension of all of that math and science. What if it was as well known as hockey? And that was sort of the thought exercise that provoked this whole webinar. So here we go. Some of the similarities between hockey and engineering. So some people have misconceptions about it. Some people think that it's only for boys, which obviously is not true, because our Canadians women's team keeps bringing home gold medals just like the men do, and they're tremendous athletes and great role models as well. Some people think you have to be a really amazing student, for example. You need to get 99% in all your classes to be an engineer, or that you have to be a really elite athlete. So that's certainly true for the upper tiers of professional sport. You need to have that tip-top condition, but there are many other ways to enjoy hockey, and that's also part of it. Lots of people play rec league, house league. I don't know what other kinds of leagues, but it doesn't have to be just that elite level. It can be something that's enjoyed by lots of people. Some people really dislike the culture around it. I know when I was a kid, growing up in rural Ontario, hanging out with my dad, watching Hockey Night in Canada on Saturday night with my, with my dad. It was, back when there was only one game a week, so it was something really special. I never really understood the fighting. I never really got into that part, but, some would say that promotes a culture of aggression, a culture of violence, that it's not good for kids. Body checking, questions about helmets and concussions, that sort of thing. It's not without its controversy, because it can certainly affect some people in a negative way. Similarly, the culture around engineering, as we've seen, sometimes it can be quite competitive at times, especially the student engineering culture. It can be a very high pressure situation, which can be hard on people, not in a physical way, but in a mental and emotional way. Sometimes we see a lot of drinking associated with engineering culture, engineering student culture in particular, and that can have its own price. So there's some questions there on both on the hockey side and the engineering side to think about the culture around it and what that means exactly and what that does to us. Very important to remember as well, not everyone has equal access. So if you have a family, if you're a kid and you have parents who have a few extra $100 or a few extra $1,000 a year that they can invest in your equipment and your league fees and your ice time, and they have, you know, the extra bandwidth to drive you to the games and things, then you can participate. But otherwise you might not be able to, or you might live in a community where there isn't an ice rink or coaches, or you might not have access to the temperatures. Maybe if you live in the southern part of Canada, it doesn't get cold enough. I don't know. It's not equally accessible for all people is the point. And we do have some great programs and some companies, I think. Tim Hortons is one that comes to mind, and Canadian Tire certainly has their kids in sports program that they support as well to help open some of those doors if financial considerations are a barrier that they shouldn't be. So interestingly enough, both those companies really identify with Canada and patriotism as part of their brand, so supporting hockey and supporting kids really does fit. Well, what if we just scaled it back and said, okay, maybe not every kid is going to enjoy hockey, or maybe they won't get into it, but they could at least try it, and they could do it maybe at least once a year. And when I was a kid, it was part of our phys ed class. We would go to the local rink and we would all shuffle around, sometimes with a cone, sometimes holding onto the edge of the boards, and you know, the kids that played hockey and ringette were confidently skating backwards and spraying ice all over the place and generally being impressive. It doesn't really matter whether the kids are good at it or not. They can still gain enjoyment and gain some confidence by improving from where they were. So bringing this over to engineering, what would be the equivalent if we had that as sort of a standard thing, that everybody just tries it out once a year, that it's sort of a part of a tradition or a part of the rhythm of the seasons? I have no idea whether all kids still do go skating every winter. I think it's great. It's good for physical fitness, and wondering, you know, maybe National Engineering Month is the answer to that on the engineering side, or maybe there's some other type of tradition that we could put in place. So imagine for a moment, what if every kid had that opportunity? And like I said here, look how much fun these kids are having. It's not about being amazing at it. It's not necessarily about recruiting the next Sidney Crosby or Haley Wickenheiser. It's about the enjoyment and the benefits that they can get just out of engaging with those pre-hockey skills. So we could think of hockey or skating rather as kind of a pre-hockey skill, or even a pre-figure skating skill. So thinking back over to the engineering side, what are pre-engineering skills? We always think about science and math as the prerequisites that we need, but I wonder what other things are necessary for engineering that have nothing to do with math and science. We have some ideas about that, and we're curious to hear what your ideas are a little later. So here's where we bring in the idea of this being a sense of national identity. So you can see here, you know, these folks, they're not hockey players, they're not elite athletes, but they are fans, and therefore they're part of the game, they're part of the system in that way. So they show up and they put their money into the system of the hockey sport. They've got their, you know, their butts in the seats, and their dollars are speaking about their love of the game. Similarly for engineering, what if we had, you know, the equivalent of a bunch of people sitting around cheering for engineering? What could that look like? What would that be? How would that come about? And knowing that, you know, these folks are still participating very happily and actively within hockey, even though they're not the ones on the ice, there are ways that each citizen can participate in engineering by using technology every day, by interacting with it, by appreciating and understanding what goes into, for example, putting in the infrastructure that's required to give everyone clean water in their neighborhood. Right now, as we speak, in my neck of the woods in Waterloo, we're getting light rail transit, and obviously it's a major disruption for everyone as the different parts of the main roads get shut down so that they can lay the tracks. But from an engineering perspective, it's very interesting, especially when you consider the impact that that infrastructure is going to have on our community for years to come. So we really think that if people are educated about these issues, if they understand why the engineering is necessary and what is it that that's going to do for them down the road, the way it's going to protect wetlands, the way it's going to protect air quality, the way it's going to protect commuting and their way of life in many different ways, they become science literate or engineering literate in the same way that these folks are hockey literate, right? These are hockey fans, and they're participating by spectating and interacting with the game in their own way. So knowing that there's more than one way to be present and to be part of a system than just to be the superstar, than just to maybe be the engineer on that side of the equation, that is so important. And you know, there is I guess to take the metaphor a little further, engineering definitely, not unlike hockey, has its own industry and is its own driver of economic growth and jobs for people. So that is a great thing to remember, that even if, let's say, you're standing up in front of a group of grade 4 students, and you know, it's not really about signing up every single one of them for engineering or convincing them that they all want to become engineers. It's not about recruiting them per se, but about giving them the information about what engineers do and how they can be part of that, the way that technology interacts in our lives. And then whether they go on and become a business major or they become a doctor or a nurse, they will be engineering literate people, and they will be appreciative and aware of what engineers bring to the forefront. So here we go into translating into a sense of national identity. We were talking a little while ago about German engineering and how I think it was BMW really pushed the idea that our cars have German engineering and that means they're the best. And early on they explained what that meant, you know, high precision, very reliable, high quality components, very consistent, never breaks down, you know, all that sort of thing. But then later on, they didn't really need to, because I'm sure each one of us, you know, notwithstanding recent Volkswagen issues with the fuel efficiency testing, hopefully that's not changing the perception of the German engineering brand too much, but it became really highly respected. So what if Canadian engineering meant something? Would it be the same as German engineering? Are we all about precision and high quality the same way they are? What if it was about something that reflected our national identity in a different way? And it's kind of cool we're having this conversation right before Canada Day. It is our nation's 150th anniversary of Confederation tomorrow. And I know lots of people are connecting to that in their own way. So this is kind of a neat thing to think about. What's the Canadian way of doing things? I would submit that it's about being excellent at innovation. I think there are many great examples of Canadian inventors, Canadian innovators along the way. Insulin is one great example. Peanut butter, as it turns out, was invented by a Canadian, just to name the really important stuff. I think we can also take credit for Alexander Graham Bell. Basketball, it's not so much on the engineering side, but you take my point. Canadians are all about innovation, and innovation is often associated with evolutions in technology, and engineers are right at the forefront of that, and everybody has a part to play. So let's maybe talk about this when we get to the open discussion part, and you're welcome to add your comments in the chat box anytime. What are some other traits associated with Canadianness? Like, what are we especially proud of? So what if each kid in Canada had a positive experience of STEM or engineering at least once per year? Maybe we could say once a month eventually, but let's walk before we run, because we've got about 33 or is it 35 million people in Canada. And so that means I think maybe 10, 12 million kids. That's a lot of kids, and how would we reach them all? You know, going through classrooms is one way, through actual camps or other types of science or STEM outreach is another way. It's really, really cool to think about the ways that we can give those, just those initial flashes, those initial activities, that initial aha moment, the way that Becky had when she was a kid and she went, oh, wow, engineering, I think I might really like this. I might be good at this. And she had that burst of confidence and that sense of inspiration that then did end up carrying her through an engineering degree where she had no other role models to rely on. You know, one of the things they say is a lot of the time kids that sign up for engineering have an engineer in the family. That's one of the most popular influences. But neither Becky or I did. So that's kind of cool. Like, who else is out there in those grade 4, 5, 6 classrooms today that could be the engineers of tomorrow? It's very, very exciting and compelling to think about. So we emphasize giving the kids inspiration to explore. Often if you give them something they can play with, there's something that really great that happens when they get their hands on something. And don't give them the pressure to say, you know what, you need to build this little wind-powered car, or, you know, do this little coding exercise, or build that popsicle stick bridge, or design that water filter, whatever the activity itself might be. You're not saying you have to do this perfectly and this is what you're gonna, you know, you're gonna be a professional at this for the rest of your life, but talk about the enjoyment. Talk about the, you know, see how you're all working together. Think about who you might be affecting with this. If this was, you know, your job, you would be helping, for example, you would be helping people get clean water, and how important that is for health and safety, especially in the developing parts of the world. Understanding the impact that engineering has on everyday life. It's not just about technology and gadgets and tinkering, you know, programming robots just for fun. I mean, that is fun for some kids, but it's also about understanding the bigger picture of it, the impact that it has, why it matters. And that's sort of the point that I'm getting at here with the impact it has on our lived experience. That is a really powerful story to tell. And in our opinion, in our experience, it just lights up kids in a way that the technology alone just doesn't. So back to our central question here. We've got hockey is already very well intertwined as a part of our national identity. It's our game. It's something we're good at, even though sometimes the Russians and the Swedes and the Americans are giving us a run for our money. You know, Canada's hockey legacy and position in the world, and, you know, this is a source of national pride for us in a lot of ways. That's very well established. What if engineering ascended in the same way and was in the same way embedded into our sense of ourselves as a country? How could we include access and inclusiveness for all Canadians? How can we give a shot at you know, playing hockey or entering engineering to any kid, regardless of what language they speak or what color their skin is or what gender they might be? We know that having the broadest and fairest possible access for all Canadians is going to give us the strongest and most vibrant engineering profession. And how can engineering and maybe other STEM fields shape our country's future and our national identity? This is something I think that's really exciting. And I've got a couple comments coming through here on the chat box. The Canadarm, the CANDO Reactor. These are excellent examples of Canadian innovations. The Avro Aero, one of the first aerospace innovations. So these are great. I mean, and there's, in my opinion, no better time to start thinking about this. You know, our country is 150 years old. What have we done in the last 150 years? What are some of the successes? What are some of the things that have gone really well? What does it tell us about who we are and where we're going? And how can we make sure that we not only build on that, but we continue to do even better, and we continue to make it, you know, be even more innovative and even more socially conscious, looking at, you know, how it affects everybody in society and how we can be more inclusive and more diverse as a profession and serve our society's needs even better. So turning it around to a little more of the tactical side, what are some of the pre-engineering skills that kids need to play with? So I think we're all pretty comfortable with the idea that math and science are sort of some of the building blocks to engineering. However, we would suggest that it's not just about math and science. There are other elements and there are other important stories about engineering that are not just about math and science, because some kids might want to grow up and be mathematicians or be scientists, and that's great, but it's not exactly the same as engineering. There really is something about being an engineer, in my opinion, that's a little different. So curious to hear your thoughts on that. What would happen? Can we imagine if every kid thought of themselves as a future engineer? What if they dreamed about it the same way that some kids dream of being famous hockey players, or maybe even famous, I don't know, YouTube celebrities, or famous rock stars, or whatever it is the kids are dreaming about these days? What if sort of one of the highest dreams that they had for themselves was that they could go through school as an engineer and get into doing some problem solving, some helping people, some making the world a better place through their engineering skills. I know it's a little bit of a tough thing to imagine. Sometimes we're aware of the stereotypes around engineering, that it's kind of boring, kind of dry, that engineers are sort of cut off from people, but we know that to not be true. Of engineering as a whole, we're all sorts of different people. We have all kinds of different personality traits. We have all different kinds of skills and strengths that we bring to the table, as it should be. Those stereotypes do not ring true for everyone, and they certainly shouldn't stop anyone who doesn't fit them from considering joining us, or just enjoying engineering on their spare time. And then finally, getting at what I was saying before, this is Canada's 150th anniversary. We're hopefully going to have a great weekend, some nice weather to go out and do our barbecue or go to a concert or whatever it is that you've got planned. What about the conversation about our future and the young people that will shape it? How can engineering fit into that, and how can we sort of begin to plant those seeds in a positive way through the outreach that we do? So at this point, I'm going to unmute the folks that have got themselves on mute. You are welcome to put your answers into the chat box, as I mentioned, and we will. Okay, it looks like some of you got yourselves muted, so in that case, you'll need to unmute yourself if you have something to say, or as I mentioned, you can go ahead and put your answers into the chat box.
I noticed, it's Becky here, Erica. There was another comment that came up about when you were talking about imagining. So easy to imagine, watch the Martian movie.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's right. That main character is an engineer, right? We are getting more engineers portrayed in pop culture. I know everyone cites the Big Bang Theory. I personally don't think that is the best role model or the most representative engineer. I think Howard Wolowitz leaves a bit to be desired in terms of a role model, but he is an engineer and he is visible, so that's kind of cool. I just watched Hidden Figures. I don't know how many other people have seen that already. It came out a few months ago, but I just watched it last week, and I thought it was just tremendous. Has an excellent example of a few engineers and programmers and what's she called? A human computer, and the ways that she contributed to something as interesting and historic as the space launch. And you don't need to be an engineer to appreciate that and to get into that. It's very cool.
Yeah. Sorry, this is Stuart here.
Hi, Stuart. Yeah, go ahead.
So, yeah, I think, one of the things is about, like, the difference between science and engineering. I had it put to me once because I was also at one time very into into chemistry, and thought, I wanted to go and design new plastics and stuff like that. And so I was thinking of becoming a chemical engineer. And I had a friend who, or one of my father's friends said to me, well, he actually had been a chemical engineer. He says, well, the difference is the chemists are the ones who are going to be figuring out the new plastics. And, the chemical engineer is the person that DuPont or somebody says, hey, I want to create this, production facility that produces, 50,000 gallons of paint an hour. So how big do the boilers and stuff have to be and things like that? So at that point, I realized that it wasn't exactly, that particular thing wasn't what I wanted to do. There were other parts of engineering that I wanted to do, but I think that's some of the potential information that potentially we're looking to convey here is, if we're trying to help, or at least the ones working with the older grades, guide people and sort of say, okay, well, if you're looking at science, it's more about, coming up with the new stuff, but engineering is more about the applying of the science, right? I myself am actually an engineering science grad, so I'm sort of halfway between those two places. But you know, there's that spectrum from sort of, you know, doing stuff in the technician type side, all the way to the figuring out the basic science and the heavy science side, and then engineering is sort of in the middle there, where they're taking science and figuring out how to make the new stuff happen.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. We're a bridge in a figurative and a literal way at times.
Yes.
No, those are great examples. That I think, for me, I think the difference between science and engineering came about somewhat in the form of realizing I didn't want to be working with the idea of something. I wanted to be actually doing it. And yes. I hear what you're saying, you know, that difference between inventing a new plastic in a lab, for example, or sort of inventing it in sort of a hypothetical way versus actually producing something on a bigger scale and putting something tangible out in the world. I realized quite early, even back to when I was playing with the mud in my parents' driveway out in the country, you know, like I like tangibly doing stuff. And I don't know, I feel like that's actually not a bad way to describe engineering either. If you get that satisfaction out of, you know, knowing that your work has some kind of tangible output. It's not just about ideas, it's about really moving stuff around and making an impact in the real world. And that might be a good way to explain it as well.
Yes, I agree. So in terms of prerequisite skills that are not math or science, I was thinking curiosity is one, wonder, sort of amazement at how things go, attention to detail. You were mentioning exploring, that's a really good one. So in the attention to detail thing, one of the examples I can, you know, give as an example of something where it's sort of like, this is so cool because you realize how much went into it. If you ever look at the lid of like a cup, a soda cup, you know, like a cup of that you get, say, at McDonald's for pop or whatever, right? You know, you look at that lid and you see how there are ridges in it to provide strength, you know, to give it vertical height, to give it structural strength, and then, of course, also to collect up anything that spills out and everything else. And, you know, you see the buttons that are there for them to indicate what types of things they are if they want to provide that information. You think about the material and everything else, but there's so much actual engineering that goes just into that little lid, right? And that's just a very tiny thing that we just, you know, it happens every day in our lives. We deal with this sort of thing, and you realize, wow, there's so much thought that just went into this tiny little thing. And there are good ones, and there are not so good ones, and you can see the impact of engineering, you know, on a very basic level.
Yeah, love that. Love it when you can give really concrete examples and show how, you know, somebody had to really think about this. All these things that we really take for granted has had so much thought put into it. Like the world around you has been so well thought of and designed and you know, manufactured for your safety. That's just, I guess, one aspect. I think that's a really really neat way to unpack engineering. And yeah, I really like your curiosity, wonder, attention to detail. I think the ability to try things out and try again and try again and try again is probably another one. I think you have to be pretty resilient and pretty stubborn when things are not working. You got to stick with it. It was definitely the case when I was facilitating a workshop with some Pathfinders. So these are girls aged 13 to 15, and we were doing this solar cell exercise, and none of the solar cells were working, and I was just about to think, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? None of these are working. I've turned these girls off engineering for life, you know, had the exact opposite of the intended effect. But they finally figured it out. They just needed to get the gears moving, like really meshing exactly. Not even a little bit of a difference was it turned out to be the key. And they said that at the end. They said, you know, you fail and you fail and you fail, and then you finally get it right, and it's the best feeling ever.
That's right. It only feels good if you didn't get it working the first couple of times too.
There you go. Exactly. And I've heard, even from some teachers teaching grades, even kindergarten to grade 3, that there are some kids that get so frustrated if things don't work on the first time. And these could be really smart kids that have all the right math and science, pre-math and science skills, who might be definitely smart enough and have the capacity to do, let's say, engineering or science or some type of problem solving, but they just don't have the patience and kind of the emotional resilience to see it through. So I think it's neat to think about those other aspects as well that need to come together.
There's, just wanted to bring attention, there's a little bit going on in the chat box, Erica. Tarana is suggesting a book that I'm assuming is recommending for, it says for 5-year-olds, I guess, called The Most Wonderful Thing. Not sure if you've heard of that one before.
Yeah.
Not one I've heard of.
This is Trana.
Hi.
So it's a book I came. Hi. It's a book I came across called The Most Magnificent Thing. I'm sorry, The Most Magnificent Thing, and it's a picture book. It's about for 5-year-olds, and it's a girl who wants to create this thing, and you're never actually told what it is. And she's got her sidekick, her pet dog, and so she goes about out on the sidewalk, picking up bits and pieces of things and banging them together and creating one thing and not liking it, moving on to the next thing, creating it, not liking it. And she goes on for about 20 different objects, and she's just creating and creating and creating. And then she has an emotional breakdown and gets really annoyed with the fact that what she sees in her head she can't create with her hands. So she goes for a walk and comes back and looks at each thing again and says, well, I like this part of this one, and I like this part of this one, and I like this part, and then sort of cobbles it all together again and comes up with her thing, which is a sidecar for her scooter so she can put the dog in it. My son,
Cool.
and it's at the library. It's probably about 2 or 3 years old. My son, who is 6, was absolutely fascinated by this book from about the age of 4 onwards, because she gets to play with her hands and do stuff with nails and hammers and stuff without parental supervision. And then 2, that she has the perseverance to keep going and going and going, and knowing that she will get to what's in her head, but it's just going to take a while. So it's a good book that I've now given out to anybody who has a 5-year-old, because it's just an absolutely fascinating take on resilience and what engineering could be, but not the actual word for it is engineering ever mentioned.
So that's interesting, because there's a book my daughter's 4 and my son is 6, and she right now just can't get enough of hearing Iggy Peck Architect. I'm not sure if you're aware of that book.
Yeah, Iggy Peck Architect, the scientist one, and
Rosie Revere Engineer.
Engineer, yeah.
Yeah. So I tried reading Rosie Revere to her, but I must admit I don't think the story in that one is as good, and she's not really thrilled with it either. And I'm not sure it's a really good pitch. But Iggy Peck Architect, unfortunately, it's not a girl, but she just loves that book entirely, and that seems to have struck a chord. And really, he's building a suspension bridge, so it's pretty close to being an engineering thing anyway. So.
We've done another webinar with she's a board member at Durham District School Board, and she's actually provided us with a list of STEM books that she recommends, and she talks about using these books, but even though they don't reference engineering in them necessarily, she talks about the way that she uses the books or suggests to other teachers, in her case, to use the book is to interrupt the story. So stop it in certain places and, sort of explore that inquiry with the kids. And that's where I would imagine you can start sort of inferring that engineering aspect of it. But I'm curious now. I'm going to go back and look at her list, and see if those books that I'm pretty sure Rosie Revere is on there, but I'm not sure if the other ones you mentioned are on there. So I'm going to go back and have a look. And then another one I've come across that's really neat along those lines is called What Do You Do With an Idea? And it's like I said, it's sort of along those same lines, but really neat, thinking of them as how you can use them and then interrupt the story, I think, to invite that sort of inquiry into the story as well and see what the kids come up with.
Yeah, so admittedly, I'm not sure this is very applicable in our particular case, but I don't know if anyone's heard of the story, the little children's book called The Dot. I think it's called The Dot.
I think I've heard.
It's about an art teacher.
Yeah, I don't think I've read it, but I've seen it.
Okay, anyways, it's a fantastic book about an art teacher and this kid, and just the idea of giving confidence to kids so that they feel that their work and stuff may actually have value, and then encouraging them effectively to keep trying, and especially one that is not believing they can do something. So, you know, in the context of art, it's a little bit easier to, if you read it, it's very, very good in that sense. But anyway, so just might be an interesting way to look at sort of like, okay, trying to get kids to believe that, yes, they can do these things if they keep sort of trying at it. Of course, I don't think any engineering conversation would be complete without talking about Lego. So I'm currently trying to design a Lego beam that will visualize, like that will show stress and strain visually, because I'm trying to build a capability to show my kids like how forces go through I-beams and trusses, to sort of demonstrate how if your I-beam gets thicker, you know, that the forces become smaller at the top, the bottom, and thus, you know, it's able to be stronger. So I've pretty much got the design down. I'm just trying to work on some of the fabrication side of this, of bending some pieces of the springs that I need to put into it. But so yeah, so I don't know. I've found Lego to be very good. It's not the most cheapest way to do some of these things, but I've been looking for a good way to visualize stress and strain, because I think it's one of the coolest things to see. Is like once you start, I mean, later on when you learn structural engineering, you sort of realize how the stress and strain goes through a truss, and it's just wicked to see how the forces, you know, sort of zip back and forth like a little, you know, zigzag, and build up towards the end. And I just think it's so awesome. So I've been hoping to be able to pull out something like that to show the kids.
Very cool. Well, Stuart, please keep us posted on how you do on that. We'd love to hear about your different iterations and experiments as you go. We are just having such a great conversation. I'm going to, at this point, wrap it up. We would love to continue the conversation. A couple ways to do that. You can subscribe to our newsletter. We promise we will not spam you. We will not give your email address away at all. We will write to you about once a month to give you the down low on what we're up to and invite you to future webinars, maybe tell you about new books we've uncovered, that sort of thing. So if you would like to stay in touch, we would love to have you as one of our newsletter subscribers. We are going to be doing a few more webinars over the course of this summer. For those familiar or not familiar with the Engineer in Residence program, we're doing a couple of sort of orientation type intro calls over the next couple Wednesdays, the first 2 Wednesdays of July, in fact. You can sign up for those here. We'll make a copy of the slides available, and you can just follow those links to get straight to where you need to be to register. Following that, if you're not really involved in the EIR program or you're not interested in that, we do have some other topics. Diverse and inclusive messaging is one of them. So essentially what this boils down to is that there are ways to talk about engineering in the language that you use and the examples that you use, that can be encouraging and that can empower students of all types to sort of lean in and be interested in what you're saying. And there are ways to talk about it that can make people feel excluded and frustrated and like they don't want to be part of what you're saying. So if you want to get the scoop on those tips and tricks that we have sort of translated from some of the research that's available on the topic, please tune in for Diverse and Inclusive Messaging, August 2nd. Sharing your engineering story, which Becky and I did a little bit of earlier in today's webinar. It might seem like a fairly simple thing, but we have put some thought into the aspects of what we share and the way we share it, and encouraging you to do the same. We really think it's like a muscle that you just keep building. Your story keeps evolving and you keep get better at telling it. We will share with you what we've figured out about that process and invite you to put it into action whenever you're speaking to kids or the general public about engineering. So that one's in August 16th. So those are the things we're doing in the summer. We will keep going in September, but we don't know what the topics will be or when they'll be yet. If you're into social media, we'd love to connect with you there. If you are following us on Twitter, you will see that I've actually tweeted a couple of the things that came up during this webinar. So that's the type of real-time access and interaction you can expect from us. We go to a lot of conferences and we make presentations and we talk to a lot of interesting people, so you can stay in touch with us there as well. Finally, our website, which will be giving a bit of a facelift over the next few months, but you can check it out now to find out a little bit more detail about what we do. So we would love to be in touch with you. So those are a few invitations. With that, we're going to say thank you so much for making time to chat with us before you head into your long weekend. I had my doubts that anyone would show up, but I'm really pleased and very happy that you all decided to join us. So thank you for lending us your ears and eyes. And again, would just love to stay in touch with you and have a very happy and safe Canada Day long weekend. Take care, everybody.